Welcome to This Explainer. Today we're going to decode a pretty fascinating mystery. We're looking at why some leaders and organizations completely defy all expectations and wildly succeed, while others, equipped with the exact same resources, just fall flat and fail. So let's kick things off with a simple question. Why is Apple consistently more innovative than its competitors, year after year? Structurally speaking, they are just a computer company, right? They really aren't fundamentally different from anyone else in their space. I mean, think about it. Their competitors have access to the exact same talent pool. They hire the same big advertising agencies, work with the very same expert consultants, and have the exact same media access. So why does it seem like Apple has something entirely different? How do they stand out so dramatically? Well, that brings us to Section 1, the Golden Circle, a paradigm shift in communication. A few years back, a discovery was made that perfectly explains this whole phenomenon. It's a framework called the Golden Circle. Basically, every single organization on the planet knows exactly what they do. Some know how they do it. Maybe they have a unique value proposition or some proprietary process. But very, very few actually know why they do what they do. And just to be totally clear, making money isn't a why. That's a result. Your why is your deeper purpose, your cause, or your fundamental belief. Most conventional companies out there communicate from the outside in. They go from the clearest facts, what they do, to the fuzziest concepts, why they do it. But the really inspired leaders and organizations, they communicate completely from the inside out. And this brings us to the absolute core takeaway of this entire explainer. If you remember one thing, make it this simple mantra. People do not buy what you do, they buy why you do it. Just think about it for a second. Imagine if Apple communicated like Dell or Gateway, companies that failed miserably trying to sell MP3 players and flat screens because they marketed themselves strictly from the outside in, just as computer makers. If Apple did that, nobody would buy their products either. Instead, Apple starts with their why, challenging the status quo. The fact that they happen to make beautifully designed computers or MP3 players or phones, well, that's just the what. All right, let's move to Section 2, the biology of decisions. It's not psychology, it's biology. You see, this inside-out approach isn't just some clever marketing trick. It is deeply, fundamentally rooted in human biology. If we think about a cross-section of the human brain from the top down, the newest part, the neocortex, corresponds perfectly with the what level. It handles rational thought, analytical logic, and language. But the middle part, the limbic system, matches our how and why. It handles emotions, things like trust and loyalty, and most importantly, it handles all human behavior and decision-making. But here's the catch, and it's a big one. The limbic system has absolutely zero capacity for language. That's exactly why we so often struggle to articulate our choices. We can look at all the rational data processed by our neocortex, but our limbic system is what's actually driving the decision. It forces us to resort to saying things like, I hear what the facts say, but it just doesn't feel right. So when you communicate from the inside out, starting with your why, you're literally bypassing that analytical brain and talking directly to the part that drives behavior. That is why your ultimate goal shouldn't be to just sell to anybody who needs what you have, but to connect with people who truly believe what you believe. Which leads us to Section 3, the Wright Brothers versus Langley, belief versus resources. To see how this biological reality plays out in history, let's look back at the intense race to invent the first powered flying machine at the beginning of the 20th century. Samuel Pierpont Langley had the ultimate recipe for success. He had a massive $50,000 grant from the War Department, a Harvard education, the best minds of the day working for him, and the New York Times following his every move. But he was driven by the what. He just wanted wealth and fame. The Wright brothers, on the other hand, they had zero funding, just bike shop money. No college degrees, no media attention whatsoever. But they were driven by a profound why, this unshakable belief that they could change the course of the world. Because they started with their why, the Wright brothers inspired their team to work with literal blood, sweat, and tears. They take 5 sets of parts out to the field every single day because they just knew they would crash before dinner. And then, on December 17th, 1903, they finally took flight. And Langley? Well, he actually quit the very day he found out the Wright brothers beat him, simply because he couldn't be first. That brings us to Section 4, the law of diffusion of innovation, scaling your belief to the mass market. So, how does starting with your why practically apply to building a massive business or movement today? How do you scale that belief? Well, it all comes down to the law of diffusion of innovation. This principle basically categorizes how populations accept new ideas. You've got your innovators at 2.5%, the early adopters at 13.5%, followed by the early and late majorities, and finally, the laggards. Now, the absolutely crucial data point to remember here is this. You cannot, and I mean cannot, achieve mass market success or hit a true cultural tipping point until you penetrate between 15% and 18% of the market. The early majority simply will not try something until someone else has tried it first. A classic example of totally missing this mark is TiVo. Remember them? They had the undisputed best quality product on the market at the time, but they launched by trying to sell their what to the highly skeptical early majority. They basically said, hey, we can pause live TV and skip commercials. And honestly, that just scared people. If they had sold their why to the early adopters who rely on intuition, if they had just said, if you're the kind of person who wants total control over your life, boy, do we have a product for you, it would have been a completely different story. Finally, Section 5, Leading with Why, Inspiring a Movement. Let's bring this whole thing together by looking at someone who flawlessly mastered the art of leading with why to shift culture on a truly massive scale. In the summer of 1963, a staggering 250,000 people showed up on the Mall in Washington, D.C. to hear Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. speak. Think about that for a second. There were no emails, no invitations sent out, no websites to check the date. So how on earth did he pull that off? Well, Dr. King didn't go around telling people what was wrong with America. Instead, he traveled and simply shared what he believed. He went around saying, I believe. I believe. And the people who believed what he believed took his cause, made it their own, and organically built the structures to tell even more people. It became such a massive movement that 25% of the audience in attendance that day were actually white. Those folks stood in the sweltering sun for 8 hours. But you know what? They didn't do it for Dr. King. They did it for themselves. They did it for their own beliefs about America. And as the famous saying goes, he gave the I have a dream speech, not the I have a plan speech. We follow leaders who inspire us with a dream, not politicians who bore us with a 12-point plan. I really want to repeat this because it is literally the ultimate law of human inspiration. People do not buy what you do, they buy why you do it. What you do is really just the tangible proof of what you believe. Which leaves us with one final, kind of provocative question for your own work and leadership journey today. You probably know exactly what you do, but do you actually know your why?